Hi everyone, welcome back to Texas Government. This next topic will be the second half of the Texas Legislature. We will be speaking about committees. The purpose of the state legislature. What exactly is the purpose of the state legislature? There are three main purposes of the legislature. The first one is to create laws. The second purpose is appropriations, and please make note of this word, appropriations, and what it means. Appropriations is money. This is how the legislature pays for every single department, agency, and policy that comes out of the legislature is through appropriations. In essence, the legislature is the bank for the state. And lastly, the third purpose of a state legislature is, of course, oversight to make sure that, one, their policies are implemented, and two, that their laws are being implemented correctly, and that the agencies and departments that are charged with this implementation are not overreaching or that they are not doing anything outside of their bounds. So what exactly is the committee and what are its functions? Well, very simply put, all of the work in the legislature is done by committees. This is where the real work takes place. Committees allow the bills to be passed to those who have expertise in an area so they can study the bill and see if any changes need to be made. So first and foremost, division of labor. Since all of the real work in the Texas legislature is done by the committees are the ones, of course, who allow this work to take place. Like I said a minute ago, this is where the expertise takes place, whether it's agriculture, health policy, public policy, educational policy. These committees are broken down by industries and subject areas. The committees themselves are considered little legislatures. Once a bill is passed to a committee, this is where the real work begins. When a bill is assigned to a committee, the committee holds public hearings. This is where witnesses for both sides of a bill can be heard. The committees hold debates on the bill, and they will then mark up the bills. By markup, I mean the bills can be revised, edited, or fully rewritten, so there are only minor changes or it will not remain substantially altered. Most bills do not leave a committee in the original form it arrives in, and this is what I'm saying by marking up a bill. It can be anywhere from a minor strike through of a word or a paragraph to a fully rewritten bill. You never know, and chances are good that when a bill is brought to a committee, it will never leave in the same form that it arrived in. So the question becomes, why do we mark up a bill? Why do we revise it? Well, very simply, it is so that it can have bipartisan support. Remember, the legislature is partisan, meaning parties will take sides. So if you want to get your legislation passed, you need support from both sides, from both parties. So you end up marking up your bill so that you can have support from both the Democrats and the Republicans. However, bills can be killed, and they can be killed in committee. And so committees are often used in this manner. Killing a bill can be done in numerous ways. The first way is by a presiding officer assigning a bill to a committee which has no idea what the bill is and will not act on it. One way a bill is killed is by the committee pigeonholing it. This simply means the committee never does any work on the bill, so it never leaves the committee and comes up for a vote. It is basically put aside and never touched again. A second way of killing a bill is called tagging. Tagging is a senatorial right or procedure. Any senator is allowed to tag a bill, which can delay hearings on a bill up to 48 hours. A senator will notify the committee chairman he or she wants 48 hours advance notice before any hearings are held. Any work done within this 48 hours before the hearing is void. Lastly is the discharge petition. There is a way to rescue bills from being pigeonholed in committees, and this is through a discharge petition. A discharge petition means a bill is brought out of committee and to the floor for consideration without a report from the committee, and usually without cooperation of the leadership of the committee. It is not used more because it is seen as a threat to the privileges of the whole committee system, and these are privileges all senators enjoy. So if one senator tries to use the discharge petition, basically they are throwing the whole system into disarray. The calendar in the House and the Senate is used for controlling the flow of legislation from committees to the floor. There are 4 types of House calendars. The first calendar is the daily House calendar, which contains a list of new bills and resolutions scheduled by the committee on calendars for consideration by the House. Now remember, there are 4 of them. The first one is the daily House calendar. This calendar must be distributed to the members 36 hours before the House may consider those measures placed on this calendar. The second calendar is the supplemental House calendar, which may contain any numerous measures passed on to a third reading on the previous day. Also, measures on the daily House calendar from a previous day that were not reached for consideration, or measures on the daily House calendar for the current day. As you can see, there is a trend here. So these are all measures that have had at least one reading, but for whatever reason have not moved on. The supplemental calendar must be distributed at least 2 hours before the House convenes. The third calendar is the local consent and resolutions calendar. This calendar will contain a list of local or non-controversial bills scheduled by the committee for consideration by the House. This calendar must be distributed 48 hours before the listed measures may be considered. The last type of calendar is the congratulatory and memorial calendar. This calendar contains a list of congratulatory and memorial resolutions and motions scheduled by the Committee on Rules and Resolutions for consideration by the House. This calendar must be distributed 24 hours before the measures may be considered. On the live PowerPoint on Canvas, I have given you this link to the 4 House calendars. Please be sure you click on through and you can take a look at the previous House calendars from the last legislative session, and you can see the types of measures that were placed on these calendars. Now the Senate calendar. The Senate has one calendar on which bills may be placed. Senate rules state all bills must be discussed in the chronological order they are placed on the calendar. Now, a blocking bill is the first bill placed on the Senate calendar. It usually deals with a proposed horticultural change. This first bill will never be considered. So if the first bill, the blocking bill, will never be considered, how does the Senate consider any bills? Well, that happens by suspension of the rule. This is the process which allows a bill to be taken off the calendar out of chronological order and placed on the Senate floor for debate. To obtain a suspension of the rule, 2/3 of the Senate must vote to suspend the rule and allow the bill to come to the floor. This requirement can often cause a bill to die on the calendar because there will not be enough votes to move it to the floor. These two article links that are on the live PowerPoint on Canvas are articles relating to suspension of the rule and any changes that have been considered in the past. These are some older articles, but they're still relevant in the sense that it gives you information, more detailed information on suspension of the rule. So be sure you check them out. If the links do not work, please let me know and I will refresh the links on the live PowerPoint. So we go from the calendars to the floor. The floor is where members of either chamber meet to debate, amend, vote on, enact, pass, or defeat legislation. The floor of the House. The legislators who are attempting to get a bill passed are known as the floor leaders when their bill is up for consideration on the floor. They will stand up in front of their colleagues and explain the points of the bill, answer questions, and in general speak in favor of the bill. When it comes time to vote on the bill, the vote cast and recorded. A recorded vote is a vote in which the name of the voter is recorded and how they voted for the bill, whether they voted yay, nay, or in other words, for or against. House members are allowed to vote yes, no, or present. The state passed Proposition 11 in November of 2007 requiring recorded votes. Before then, it was a simple voice vote. The voice vote was an official vote, but did not record how all lawmakers specifically voted. Now, a point of order is another procedural part of the floor. It is simply a formal question concerning the legitimacy of a legislative process. A successful point of order can result in the postponement or defeat of legislation. Now, the floor of the Senate. The Senate floor operates much like the House floor. Once a bill is brought to the floor, you would have debate, although not as much as on the House floor. And the reason that you wouldn't have as much debate on the Senate floor as you would on the House is, remember, the blocking bill on the Senate calendar. So if you have a bill coming to the floor of the Senate, you already have 2/3 that are with you in removing the bill from the calendar to the floor. So you already have that 2/3 necessary support for your bill, so you wouldn't have to argue it too much more. The last thing to consider about the floor is the filibuster. Similar to the U.S. Senate, the Texas Senate can filibuster. The filibuster can be used to delay a bill by unlimited debate. Usually the speaker is hoping to elicit a compromise on some point or force the withdrawal of the bill entirely. Unlike the United States Senate, a Texas senator may not surrender the floor to another sympathetic senator in order to continue the filibuster. So how do we stop a filibuster? In the state Senate, you cannot stop a filibuster. The Texas senator is allowed to go on as long as he or she is able. You may remember the U.S. Senate has the procedure of cloture. where 60 senators can vote to shut down a filibuster. The Texas Senate does not have cloture per se, but has a form because it only allows one senator to filibuster. Once that senator is done with the filibuster, a vote is taken. Now we move on to how a bill becomes a law. Well, first and foremost, there is an introduction to the Senate, an assignment to a committee, then the Senate committee action. Of course, it is placed on the Senate calendar. It is then moved to the Senate floor, and from there it is voted on, and then, should it pass the Senate, it will be introduced to the House. In continuation, once it is in the House, it is assigned to a House committee. The House committee then takes action. It is placed on a House calendar, where it then moves to the House floor. Once it is voted on the House floor, it is moved to a conference committee, where it will be reviewed by members of both the House and the Senate. And then there is a final passage, final vote for the bill. Now, everything that was on those previous two slides on how a bill becomes a law is shown on this graphic. If you will see, you can follow the arrows. Start at number 1. We are talking about introducing a bill in the Senate. However, the process is the same whether it is the Senate or the House. It is just one starts in the House, one starts in the Senate. So follow the arrows. You can see how it will go from process to process, from committee to committee, to calendar, to the floor, to voting. So look at this. You do not need to remember all of these. You do not need to know which comes first, but I want you to study it and see just how detailed the process is. Now, once it has been voted on by both the House and the Senate, the governor receives the bill. Now, if the governor chooses, he may sign the bill into law. Once it is signed, it becomes law in 90 days. If he chooses to not sign it, should he not veto it, it will still become a law in 10 days if the legislature is still in session. However, should the governor not veto it and not sign it also, and it sits on his desk, it will become a law in 20 days if the legislature is not in session. So the governor has the option of signing it, not signing it, and let it sitting there, or he can veto a bill, which would just kill the bill right there on his desk. Now, I'm just a bill. The link at the bottom of this slide is to the video on how a bill becomes a law. It illustrates it from the federal system, but at the state level it works the same way. So whenever you click through on Canvas, I will give you both a link on Canvas and on the live PowerPoint that is sitting there. Watch the video. It's a short, cute video. I love this video. And just substitute the Texas Legislature for Congress and Governor for President. The process is the same. So be sure you go through and you watch the video and see how a bill becomes a law. The institutional tools of leadership. One of those tools that leaders can use is the Legislative Budget Board. This board has 10 members and operates continuously even while the legislature is not in session. It is a permanent joint committee of the Texas Legislature which develops budget and policy recommendations for legislative appropriations, completes fiscal analysis for proposed legislation, and conducts evaluations and reviews to improve the efficiency and performance of state and local operations. Next is the Legislative Council. The Legislative Council consists of 14 members. It is shared jointly by the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor. The Texas Legislative Council is a nonpartisan legislative agency that provides bill drafting, computing, research, publishing, and document distribution services to the Texas Legislature and the other legislative agencies. The Council also serves as an information resource for state agencies, the citizens of Texas, and others as time and resources allow. Next is the Legislative Audit Committee. This is a permanent standing joint committee. The Legislative Audit Committee is made up of 6 members: the Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker of the House, 1 member of the Senate appointed by the Lieutenant Governor, the Chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, the Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, and the Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. The Legislative Audit Committee's purpose is to appoint and govern the state auditor. The last tool is the Sunset Advisory Commission. The Sunset Advisory Commission was created in 1977. Its job is to identify and eliminate waste, duplication, and inefficiency in government agencies. The 12-member commission is a legislative body that reviews the policies and programs of more than 150 government agencies every 12 years. The commission questions the need for each agency, looks for potential duplication of other public services or programs, and considers new and innovative changes to improve each agency's operations and activities. The Commission seeks public input through hearings on every agency under Sunset Review and recommends actions on each agency to the full legislature. In most cases, agencies under Sunset Review are automatically abolished unless legislation is enacted to continue them. Now consider that there are restraints on the powers of the presiding officers of the legislature. First is personality. Are the leaders strong and ruthless, or easygoing and willing to compromise? Each one of these has its pros and cons and will determine how you work with others in legislature. The team. Each of the leaders, each of the presiding officers must build a team of other legislators they can count on and who will have their back when it comes time to pass legislation. Lobbying and bureaucracy. What do lobbyists and bureaucrats want? They have to work hand in hand, but the lobbyists all have the interests of their clients first and foremost, whereas bureaucrats are their job is to administer and implement the policies of the legislation. The governor. Is the governor on board with the legislation, or will the governor veto it? These are restraints on the powers of the governor and what he or she is liable to do. Of course, you must consider the political climate that you find yourself in. What does the public want, or how do they feel about the legislation that you are trying to pass? Also, what are your political or economic ambitions? Does the leader want to move up to a higher position in government? Will passing legislation detrimental to big business or something similar jeopardize their possible support in the future? Remember, what you do as a representative or as a senator will come back and be a reflection of you if you choose higher office. And of course, you also have to be cognizant of other legislators. Other legislators have other masters besides the presiding officer. Other legislators may decide it is better to aggravate the presiding officers than, say, those who support them, like the lobbyists. Consider that as legislators, the presiding officers, at least the Speaker of the House, who is an actual legislator, has to also answer to the people that he or she represents. Finally, you and the legislature. Be aware that you should understand how we elect legislators, how the legislature works, and how a bill becomes a law. Texas actually makes it very easy for you as a citizen to stay informed about state politics. I have given you a link to the Texas Legislature so that you can find out who your legislator is, what they've been up to. So be sure you click through on the actual live PowerPoint so that you can find your legislator and you can see what that person has done to better your community. Also, as a citizen, you are allowed to testify in front of a committee for any of these bills that come up for a vote. So, go to the website for the Texas House Witness Registration so that you can see how you can be one of these witnesses in order to testify for or against legislation in the future. This wraps up the committees of the Texas Legislature and the Texas Legislature topic for Government 2306. Be sure to let me know if you have any questions. Email me and I'll be happy to respond. Until next time, see you then.